All right, here's some problems here. What baits to use when? And, it reminds me there are these two blondes. They were fishing in the Snake River and big trout and salmon river. And they're out there and the DNR pulls up and says, "Hey, can I see your licenses, ladies?" And they're like, "We're not fishing officers. We're just cleaning up the river." And they're like, "Yeah, right. What are you talking about?" And they're like, "We got magnets on our lines." And they're like, "Yeah, sure, ladies. Bring it up. Let's take a look at this." So they reel them up, and sure enough, they got big old magnets on there. They're like, "All right, ladies, have a good day." So the DNR drives off, and the one blonde says, the other one says, "Stupid DNR doesn't know there's steelhead in this river?" And with that, baits. There's all sorts of baits, and you know what? I think of baits. I heard a guy one time said to me, "What's the best bait on Lake St. Clair?" And that brings to me two different thoughts. One, the best bait's the one on the end of your rod. What you have confidence in and what you're going to throw is generally going to be the best bait for you. Sometimes I get into that every 15 casts. I got to change baits. I usually don't catch stuff doing that, casting wise. Then the second thing is, what's the best Lake St. Clair bait? What's the best tool in your toolbox? That would be the answer. What's the best tool in the toolbox? Every one of them's got different applications, different buoyancies, different strike zones, different triggering aspects to them. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you all these from here. I should pick this up. No? All right. Hold on real quick. Yeah. Let's do Joe's, Dogs, and Fuzzy Does-Its. Yep. Right there. Yeah. Here's your big plastics and jigs. And then Fuzzy Does-It's right next to it. It's like a large Kincadia. It's great for working the bottom when they're sitting on bottom. And it's also, if you go to other lakes, a lot of times sucker fishing, it attracts fish in. The things really work your forearms too.
You got to drag these behind the boat.
Yeah, I've actually trolled those. We got nice fish on them trolling as well. The guy that does those, Craig Eversaw, he puts a big number 10 on a spinnerbait across it, and we've caught fish that way and just run them straight. So it's pretty good stuff. But that's your jigs. Those are generally slower baits. It'd be a trigger bait, when fish are neutral, or they can be active, but it's a slower presentation. The retrieve on it would be much like a jerk bait. So, hold that. Yeah. All right. Can you guys all hear me? All right. It would be a lot like a jerk bait on those. Usually, you'd swing it out, let it sink down, and then for the dog, I like to rip it as I'm cranking, and then let it set, and then rip, crank, and then maybe do 4 or 5. So it's an erratic retrieve. And what I like to see with the dogs is have them swing up, and then fall. Swing up, and fall. Now the Joe's a much more erratic retrieve, and that one's a little heavier and it'll drop a lot faster. So a lot of times I use a lot of the action with the reel. So I twitch, and what it'll do is it'll flip like this. Now, the dog's good for working shallow stuff, and they even got a shallow dog that stays real high. The Joe's great tool for working deep breaks, deep weed cover, or it's a little faster presentation. So if you have fish follow in pounders or dogs, you throw out, but you're just getting follows, you can't get them to pull the trigger. A lot of times this quicker, more erratic retrieve of this can pay some dividends. Not always, but sometimes. That's what I would try, though. If I had about 5 follows on a pounder, I would probably downsize and go a little faster and a little more erratic and see if I can't get something to go. So that's that. Next is, I think I got it. Yeah, thanks. Next would just be your bucktails, whether it be a marabou tail, which a lot of people think, in the old days they said these things were great in the spring, your bucktail or your tinsel. That's usually a good bait for cover in water. It's a great bait to keep up in the water column, depending on the blade setup you have. And it's also a great hooking bait. You know, it's pretty much a wire with trebles on it. A couple things I'll tell you about that, as well as spinner baits, is before you buy them, check the wire on them, and then the hardware. You know, you don't want, especially spinner baits where the blades are, the clevis that holds on the blades. What happens is some of the manufacturers will use a little cheaper stuff, and you rip them through weeds for 6 hours, and then they break off, and you're pissed. And then you got to buy more baits, and then the wife's pissed. So it's a nasty circle, you know. But yeah. So you got that. The bucktails may have your willow leaves will usually run deeper, and then the bigger the blade, the bigger rounder, your Colorados and stuff will run higher. So if you're fishing shallow weeds, you probably want either a set of doubles, Colorados, something, a marabou, a nice light presentation. You can keep it up. If you want a fast presentation, you can go with little Indianas and whiz it in. There was about 7-8 years ago, a bait called musky candy was one of the hot things in Minnesota. They would just buzz them in. This was before the number 10s. And they would just burn these things in, and the fish were going hog wild on them. Just little Indianas, a big skirt off the bat. So Vibraxes are good, Maps, high fins, cowgirls, shumways, and spankies. Inhaler's a great bait as well. I don't have too many of them, but it's good. Here's an example. There's an example of one fish. Baits are just tools. That fish there, we went up in mid-July. We were going to night fish from like 1 in the afternoon till about 7 in the morning every day. And we were going to try to do that, and they were getting big fish at night. And this fish is at night, but we got hit with 2 cold fronts in July. It got down to the high 30s at night, and which usually will just shut the fishing down. And we were getting like 1 or 2 shots at fish a day, that if we were lucky, and it was usually when it got warm. Well, he went with dogs. We were using dogs and slow twitch baits and glide baits because the fish were so inactive. I mean, they weren't following bucktails. They weren't following fast-moving topwaters. So they're all tools. That's we're out fishing with the guy there, a guide. My buddy wanted to hire this guide on Eagle Lake, and the guy said, throw spankies. Everybody's catching fish on spankies. Well, after 4 hours of not seeing fish on spankies, I said, hey, I know I'm doing something wrong here, but I'm going to grab a ziggy and work the corners of the structure. It was a lake, Canadian Shield Lake, Eagle Lake. There are a couple world records caught there way back when. And what happens if, you know, it was pretty obvious to me if they're not sitting right up top, then they're probably on the break. So I worked the ziggy. 10 minutes later, I got lucky and got one, you know. And all the fish started coming off the breaks. So I just got lucky, but sometimes doing the same thing over and over again is going to get you the same thing, you know. So it's good.